Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about issue number 10 of Invincible Iron Man, written by Jerry Duggan. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoy this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. With that out there, this issue opens at one of the harshest prisons in the United States with Rhodey making his way to the yard with a guard at his side. Now, strangely enough, said guard offered Rhodey a cell phone because apparently he had a call for him. But see, Rhodey was no fool because at first he declined the device because he was fully aware that this could be a setup. Because all the guard really needed was his fingerprints on the contraband to get him in trouble. But lucky for Rhodey that wasn't the case, because the guard then goes on to tell him that he has friends in high places. So with the phone in hand, Rhodey proceeds to answer it just to hear that he has to hold for Tony. So with that said, we then skip over to the man himself, currently at the Hellfire Club talking in a crowd until a waiter appeared with a phone of his own. So with Tony taking the call, the two men quickly realized that neither of them set this conversation up, and there is something more at play. So with both of them on edge, a group of men started to surround Rhodey. Now at this point Tony immediately realized what was going on. He realized that Feilong set this whole thing up so Tony could hear Rhodey get killed in jail. So with things about to hit the wall, Tony tells Rhodey to hang up and prepare to fight because his life is in danger. But just as the warning was issued, a man proceeded to attack Rhodey. And just like that, the fight was on. Now one thing you have to understand is that Tony has taken lives before, but every time he did so there was always a flinch involved. But this time, while Rhodey was being attacked, there was only a freight train of righteous anger pounding through his veins. So as Tony dashed towards Feilong, an unlikely angel stepped in between them, for Wilson Fisk stopped him dead in his tracks, and told Tony that the arrangements he requested had already been implemented in the prison several days ago. And just like that, the Sandman showed up and made short work of Rhodey's attackers. Because when Wilson Fisk, the former Kingpin, needs someone protected in prison, they get protected in prison. So with the Sandman putting in work, one individual managed to get up and close with Rhodey and was moments away from killing him, but that was when the Living Laser stepped in and saved the day. So with Rhodey out of danger, the Living Laser goes on to tell him that his employer hired them to keep him safe until they get out. So with Rhodey protected, the of them continue their conversation, and Rhodey tells Tony that he has been reading the papers and is all caught up to speed. So Tony needs to do what he gotta do and win, so he can get him out and have an armor waiting for him with coordinates. So with Rhodey and Tony on the offense, the prison guard informs Feilong of Rhodey's newfound protection, which, as you may have guessed it, pissed him off. So with Feilong's attempt on Rhodey's life falling short, we skip over to Tony having a conversation with Wilson Fisk in a private room a few weeks prior. Now for those who don't know, issue number 9 of Invincible Iron Man ended with Tony meeting with Wilson Fisk, and on this page, we see how that conversation played out. Because during that interaction, Tony asked for Wilson's help in protecting Rhodey, which was why Sandman and the Living Laser were helping out War Machine. So with that said, fast forward to the current day, Wilson Fisk asked Tony if he's absolutely sure he needs Feilong alive at this time. In which Tony responds by saying yes, he needs him alive a little bit longer, because he needs what's inside of his head to accomplish their goals. But once he has it, there are a long line of people who want him gone, with Emma already calling dibs. So speaking of Emma, Hazel walks in at that moment, which is the same moment in X-Men number 26 after she spoke to Kate in the alleyway. So just like before, right before she was able to attack Feilong, Tony was able to intercept her and take her to the back room, where Emma proceeded to knee him down below. So with Tony hurt on the ground, he picks up the power dampener that Emma cast on the ground and tells her that she may be able to kill Feilong, but she may not be able to take out the Sentinels on her own. Because Tony has no idea what Feilong had baked into those things. Now Tony knows that his countermeasures for Magneto are in there, and because of that, he needs to know what else they are dealing with. So for the time being he is engineering a solution, but in order to do it right, he will need more time and information that his father found outside this reality. So just as Tony was picking up the inhibitor ring, Feilong entered the room. So with Feilong shocked to see Tony proposing to Hazel, quickly the two exchange thoughts on how to best move forward, in which she tells Tony that she dreams about avenging all who died, and which Tony promises to do just that. So with the ring on Emma's finger, Tony asks if he could kiss her to better sell the moment, in which Emma tells him that he better enjoy it because it will be his first and last time touching her. So as the two share a kiss, Feilong watches on in belief. So with the two selling the kiss, we fast forward to Tony approaching Feilong at the Hellfire Club and proceeding to thank him. Because according to Tony, he would still be wasting his life in his armor saving people he doesn't even know if Feilong didn't force him into retirement. So with that said, Feilong replies with he is very welcome. Now what Tony is doing is playing possum, because in order to pull everything off he must hide his title as the Black King as well as his engineering. And the best way to do that was to pretend that he has fallen off the wagon. Because if Tony wanted to catch Feilong off guard, then he would have to make him believe that he had truly given up and looking to change his life. So with the marriage coming up, Feilong asked if he was invited, in which Tony almost said yes, but then quickly realized if he was to say yes then he wouldn't come. So to assure his attendance, Tony had to say no, and just like that, Tony had him. So with Feilong guaranteed to be in attendance, he goes on to ask Tony where did Emma Frost go, because Tony must know. In which Tony replied that he thought it was obvious, Mars. Because before Tony took a blowtorch to the armor, he checked the black box, which it said it had been to our moon and then Mars by teleporting. So if Tony was Feilong, he'd start to worry more about the mutants rebooting Mars attacks. So with that said, Tony proceeded to walk away knowing that he had won, because Feilong had many ways to win this war, while Tony only had one. And following this night, he had ensured that when the time came Orchis would make the costly mistake his gambit required. So with the world aware of Tony's newest engagement, the two pack up for their wedding day in Las Vegas, the home of the shotgun wedding, the sham weddings, and every wedding in between. So with the two visiting Vegas, they did what lovers are expected to do in that situation: dinner, dancing, and all the romancing one would expect. And once all that was done, and the night had come, the clothes came off and the armor went on. And right before Tony takes off, Emma mentions how she was going to leave to do some quiet X-Men business. So if she doesn't show up at the chapel the following day, then that most likely means she is dead. So with that out there, Tony takes off. Now Tony doesn't ordinarily commit crimes, but in this situation, he chooses to adapt. For the Mark Mill was a fine armor for skulking around and avoiding fights, but he was going to need something beefier to take down the Stark Sentinels. So before he could create the right armor, he would need to gather the right capabilities to fabricate. So on the night before his wedding, Tony broke into a secret lab of Zeke Stane and robbed him blind. So much like his father, Zeke's given Tony a lot of trouble in the past, so Tony bet that there would be no blowback from him doing this. So luckily, Zeke relied on drones, and because of it was a pretty quick smash and grab, so that night Tony did everything but stop up his toilet. So when everything was set and done, Tony stole the machine that could build other machines. Now with the device in hand, Deadpool backed up a truck to help with the extraction. Now upon seeing Deadpool, Tony instantly had his reservations about the driver, but Cap vouched for him. So with the device safely put away, Tony quickly showered and changed before setting off to the chapel for the big day. Now Tony wasn't nervous about walking down the aisle for the first and only time in his life until he opened those doors and saw her standing there. To Tony, Emma looked so beautiful, courageous, and witty. And at that moment he knew this was an arrangement that was going to end, but he didn't need to be a futurist to take one look at the woman to know Emma Frost was going to break his heart. But despite knowing the future, he was looking forward to it anyway. So as the two were standing at the altar, Feilong came walking through the doors. So just as they were about to say their vows, Emma took off her inhibitor ring and quickly took over Feilong's mind. So with Emma in control, her and Tony leave the chapel behind and enter Feilong's mind. So with the two walking about, they come across a memory of Feilong watching a recording of Howard Stark, the same recording he destroyed. So with the video on full display, Tony gets everything he needs to know from Feilong's photographic memory. So while Tony is doing that, Emma takes this opportunity to download what she can about the Stark Sentinels. So with our heroes robbing Feilong's memories, we see Tony watch the video and observe every bit of information. Because through this video Tony learns that his father has discovered a metal outside their periodic table that shouldn't exist, because this metal was outside their universe. So if Howard was successful in finding this metal, it could change everything as we know it, like how iron was to their ancestors. So with that going on, Feilong started to realize something was going on, and within moments he was on the attack. So with Feilong fighting off Tony, Emma quickly restrained him and proceeded to once again work on his mind. But this time, Emma made sure that Feilong would never remember this encounter, and if he ever was to think that Hazel and Emma were the same person, then he would get a splitting headache and never think of it again. So with everything secure, Emma decided to do a deep dive into Feilong's mind to discover why he hates mutants so much. So as they begin to look, Emma brings up how the theoretical discovery his father found sounds a lot like Mysterium. But as she was saying that, Tony told Emma to hold that thought, because Feilong was obsessed with Tony's father, so it was only right for Tony to see how Feilong's parents were with him. And at that moment was when we discover that Feilong's parents are mutants, and the reason why he hated them so much was because he was born without powers. And because he had no powers, Feilong went around and told everyone that his parents abandoned him, but by the looks of it, that was quite the opposite, because they loved him for who he was and he hated them for who he was not. So with Tony having everything he needs to take down the Sentinels, he tells Emma that Feilong's fate is in her hands now, and it is up to her to make the call. But if she does do it, he requests that she makes it look like a stroke. So with Feilong's life in her hands, Emma could easily coerce him into confessing everything, but Orchis would just end up killing him. But see, that wouldn't be enough, because Emma would prefer if the world knew the truth. And because she prefers that, Feilong has received a stay of execution. But just because they let him live this day doesn't mean that he is off the hook, because one day they will take him out. And as for everything that just transpired, Feilong would remember none of it. So with the two exiting Feilong's mind, they pick up right where they left off, kissing at the altar. Now with the ceremony complete, Feilong approached the newlywed Tony and asked him to reconsider joining the ranks of Orchis. Because from Feilong's point of view, Tony could still save face and regain a visible role in his old company. So with Tony once again turning down his offer, the two men go their separate ways. So with Emma and Tony riding off into the sunset, we get a recap of what Mysterium is, because Emma states that Tony's father had clearly nosed onto it, but she suspects he never got his hands on any of its metal. Because its metal could only be mined by mutants from a place outside space and time called the White Hot Room. And once they got the materials, the mutants more or less used it as a soft power after the terraforming of Araco. So with the mysterious metal his father was after within his reach, Tony asked how much of the stuff they have, and which Emma replied by saying if they can get off the world she can get a lot. But the real question is how much do Tony wants, to which he replies with all of it. So with that said, this issue of Invincible Iron Man comes to an end. Now when it comes to this issue, I was kind of surprised that at the end of the comic Emma was willing to hand over all their Mysterium to Tony. Because I understand he is going to use it to build a new suit, but how much does he actually need? And when it comes to Feilong's secret, I was actually surprised by it, because if he were to have a child in the future, there would be a high probability that it would have the X gene because of his parents. So with that said, his hatred of mutants would also have to extend to his future kids if he were to have any. But anyway, I also noticed the night before Tony and Emma's wedding that Emma went off to do some X-Men business, and if I was a betting man I would assume that would be revealed in the next issue of X-Men. So with that out the way, this was another good issue that played perfectly into the overall story. So down in the comment section below let me know your thoughts about this issue and what predictions you could have moving forward. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next review.